Okay, let's take a look at our weather. Got some interesting systems affecting the east and the west here coming up. Even a severe weather threat across the areas east of Texas. Let's take a look here at the map. This is 12Z, and that's 4 a.m. Pacific, 7 a.m. on the East Coast. And watch this southern system here. It's starting to respond from the system behind it coming in from the northwest. This is going to cause this lead system to turn negative tilt. And you go through the center, draw a line through the center. It's tilting this way versus the one back here is a positive tilt. It's tilting forward if you draw a line through the middle of these lines there. But the system turning negative tilt with the warm air ahead of it, that's a recipe for some severe weather. We do have some risk of severe weather in Louisiana, Arkansas, and Mississippi coming up as we head out. Looks like through tomorrow on Wednesday. In the west, we're watching this system here coming off the Pacific here, so we'll go forward and watch all of this here. That lead system, as it goes north, is really weakening, so no longer poses a major weather risk. The system behind it digging in, and that's got enough cold air with it that as it slides east, especially when we get into about here by early Saturday, could see some wintry weather potential developing on this north side where we have enough moisture. The system in the west coming in as a closed low down the California coast. Not enough cold air to bring any low elevation snow with that, but some showers mainly in California where this system doesn't seem to have a whole lot of moisture with it. But let's take a look at this lead system here. This is interesting as it starts to tilt more. Now when you start to see it go into neutral here, if you draw a line there and then even it's closed low, first of all, but it's definitely got plenty of moisture associated with it as it drags off to the east. And the question is, where can it be cold enough where we can have wintry weather, the combination of moisture and enough cold air. This isn't super frigid. It's away from the core of the jet stream to the north, but there's enough cold air aloft here. I think we could find some interesting weather. So let's go to a different source here. We're going to take a look at past 6 hours precip, and there we go. Saturday night we got low pressure off the coast. Going to zoom in even more. Let's go into the continental U.S. I'm on Tropical Weather Tidbits, by the way. You can actually go access these models yourself if you would like. I'll kind of go in here and explain a little bit more what I'm seeing. And so yeah, this is interesting. Now we're a few days out, so the track of this low is critical. Basically what you're looking at here, this blue line, this 540 line, its thickness, measuring the distance between the pressures of 1,000 millibars and 500 millibars, which is pretty high up. But basically this 540 line represents approximately where you can see a rain snow line. Now that varies depending upon different things, including elevation, stuff like that. We're plenty warm if you're on the coast, and we're just seeing some rain, chilly rain, as you're on the west side of this low. But if you get back up to the far north Georgia, there's some moisture. If you have more moisture coming south, you could certainly get some snow showers into the Atlanta area with this on the back side. But we're mainly talking about western North Carolina and then maybe sliding out into the Piedmont here. I'm going to go back one frame. Let's go back here to Saturday. It's going to be early afternoon Eastern time. And the moisture is still primarily out ahead of the colder air. So we're not really looking at much snow yet. We get out to Saturday evening. This is when you start seeing some snow flying in western North Carolina, some of the northwest Piedmont. And then we go out a little further. This low is intensifying some here as it comes up the coast. Got some potential for snow. Really, anywhere west of this 540 line especially, but even a little bit east of there, might be cold enough for some heavier moisture. Talking about Greensboro, Winston-Salem, down possibly to Charlotte. It's cold enough there for sure. 540 line running right there. Looks like about through Charlotte. And then we go forward in time, and there's enough moisture on the backside. We could get some flakes down in the parts of South Carolina too. Maybe down to Florence. As this low goes up the coast, you're starting to see some snow chances increase a little further east. And then it's really intensifying close to the coast there. And that's a good way to get a wraparound when it's moving slowly like that. And look at what the model is showing, some deep blue there in the eastern North Carolina, including Raleigh and down to Wilmington. Plenty cold enough, below 540 here. And again, this is not frigid air, but it's cold enough air when you have heavy enough moisture. And then we start to see, as it continues on, this colder air aloft is weakening a bit. So, but very impressive structure of the storm, pretty intense here. And it finally starts to head off the coast. Now, the question is, being a few days out, would this track change a little bit? Climatologically, sometimes these things tend to go a little further west or a little further north, and so maybe that could bring places like Washington, D.C., Baltimore into play if that would happen, but we'll just have to wait and see. That's the interesting winter weather issue for the East Coast coming up this weekend. Nothing definitive there just yet, but it looks like we're going to have a pretty significant precipitation system at least. And this weak system here heading down the west coast, just showers, high elevation snow showers even down in Mexico there. Now we're going to zoom back out and kind of look at the long range here. And longer range. We're already kind of in the long range here. I want to go back to 500 millibar height because that's where we can see the troughs and the ridges, and the blue is where it kind of looking at below average conditions, and the redder areas are where it's warmer, especially you see out here in the Pacific. But there's a pattern here in the west where we got potential for systems to dive south down the west. And as we go forward in time here, watch this next system right here coming down into the northwest. Very cold air associated with that. You'd be looking at least some snow showers in the Seattle area, maybe down to Portland. So some low elevation snow potential with that. In the northwest, system ahead of it getting kicked out. And maybe that one's turning a little negative tilt too, so it could be a little bit of a severe weather threat there. Of course, we're talking about 7 days out now. We're out to Valentine's Day. There's a very cold air mass digging south across the west. There it goes, the close low by Wednesday, centered over places like Wyoming, Idaho, and Utah. And where I live in Vegas, we get some pretty cold air out of that. Wouldn't really get much chance of moisture, though, because we're on the west side. Really needed to come down over us. If that were to happen, that would make things pretty interesting here. But so far, none of the models are really showing that happening. But something to watch. But plenty of cold air coming down the west. On the back side of that, get some below freezing nights here in Vegas out of that, I'm sure. Because that's the main thing here. Now we'll watch as that continues east, taking some cold air with it eastward. Another little system digging behind it here in the west. And again, look at the east, how things are just warming up. After that system this weekend, you're in warm air central. Ahead of this next cold front, because pretty cold air there across the plains. It's especially across the northern plains there. All right, let's take a look and further out. As far as the East Coast goes, you get some of this cool air coming in, but it's definitely weakening as it moves east. The brunt of it's kind of heading more to the north, as this ridge is really resisting the influx of the coldest air. This system here diving along the west. Again, we're heading way out in the time, but it's fun to look at the long range just to play around, just kind of get a trend here. The overall trend is for colder type systems to continue to drop into the west. We're not really going to talk about any specifics as far as precipitation this far out, but you know, sometimes we see something pretty interesting on these runs. But mainly looking at, you see this flow coming southwest, northeast, all the way up well to the northeast, talking above average conditions there. Not a whole lot of winter, so better get it this weekend. Looking at some